I'm sure I'm not the first person to discuss thesis statements around you, but there's a lot of misinformation out there about what a thesis statement is, what a thesis statement isn't, what it can do, what it can't do, what it should do, and what it shouldn't do. So I just want to clear the air and make sure that we're all on the same page for this particular discussion, because the thesis statement is an incredibly important part of a paper in terms of reaching out to your readers and making sure that they are going to follow what it is that you have to say. So ultimately, what is a thesis statement? Well, it's the piece that normally goes at the beginning of the paper outside of some special circumstances. And what it is meant to do is direct readers to what the central argument in the paper is going to be about. It's going to show them kind of the broad strokes that the argument is going to take and the main thing that you're going to be trying to prove within your writing. It's kind of like looking at a roadmap and looking at a path before you decide to go on a trip or before you go on a given trip. That's what the thesis statement is going to do. It's going to kind of show you the route up front. It's not the individual street signs or the exit in 15 miles from your GPS that you're going to get whenever you're actually on the road. That's paragraph stuff. But in writing, this is going to be the stuff that kind of comes up front and lets people know what they're going to be doing and just gives them a general heads up of where they're going to be going along the way. So what makes a thesis statement? What goes into a thesis statement? There's really only three components that need to be there. And I personally would argue there are only three pieces that should be there, but they're very broad in what they do. The first piece is the topic, the discussion of what it is that you're going to be talking about. There should be some identification of audience if it's not already built into a given genre. And then there should be conclusions. And in this case, conclusions doesn't mean the thing that goes at the end of the paper. It means you've done all the research already. What did you conclude? What is your central claim? What is your argument going to be? So first step is topic. Let's say I want to make a argument about which hero is the greatest Avenger out of Marvel's cinematic universe. Well, then my topic is going to be heroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that's really all that I need to get across in the topic part of my thesis statement. I can take that a number of different directions, so I need to narrow that down by looking at the audience. Now, I could be talking to fellow comic book nerds, in which case I can have a very specific audience. It can be people who are on a given forum or people that I'm in a direct conversation with. It could be, my cousin Nick. Or I could be writing it to a larger, let's say, academic audience. I could write this as an American studies paper and look at what that reveals about the cultural values in America. Most likely, though, if I'm going to be making this argument, given that I'm making it in this format right now, I'm going to be making it to you guys. I'm using it as an example to teach you, but ultimately, for this to land, I have to tailor it toward a young adult audience and make it real for you guys in a way that you care. So I'm going to have to put something in there that forecasts that this is going to be about or for you guys as well. And then finally, the conclusion. If I'm going to make an argument about which hero is the best Avenger, then I need to have someone in mind before I start writing. And for me, that's going to be Captain America. So putting all three of those pieces together, my thesis statement would be something to the effect of Captain America is the greatest hero among Marvel's Cinematic Universe. And that's all that would be there. Because I'm talking to you guys, because we're having a conversation, and that's all that thesis statement needs to be, because you know that I am talking directly to you. If I were putting it in a paper, if I were going to write it, say, like the policy level of stasis theory, then I would say young adults should strive to be more like Captain America in order to live their most virtuous or most heroic life. If I wanted to write a values claim, then I would say that simply that he's the best superhero, and there doesn't really need to be a particular audience attached to that one, because it's just a broad general claim that I'm making. Although I could narrow it down and say that Captain America is the best superhero for little kids because he's the most straightforward, or something like that. If I'm talking to like young parents, any number of things that I can do to modify some of these. I can play with the conclusion, and I can play with the audience a little bit to write a different paper on the same topic. But ultimately, it just comes down to topic, audience, and conclusion. Because, well, there are a lot of things that people like to make their thesis statement do that really it shouldn't, because at best, they slow things down, and at worst, they get in the way of what really needs to get done. So, for example, some people like to have their thesis statement outline their entire paper, and they would say, well, Captain America is the best superhero because he is extremely strong and he's extremely virtuous and because he defends those who need to be defended. And that's fine information to go into the paper, but that doesn't need to be in the thesis statement. That's what goes into the actual paper. All the thesis statement needs to do is say that you're arguing in favor of Captain America. Likewise, a thesis statement doesn't need to deal with objections. It doesn't need to deal with rebuttals. They're going to be kind of built into it. You're going to have a strong qualified thesis statement, then they're already going to be there, but you don't need to forecast those things unless you're making a rebuttal argument. You don't need to say, well, in spite of the presence of Captain America, or in spite of Iron Man and the Hulk, then I think Captain America is the best one. No, you can say, I think Captain America is the best one, and then say, there are people who would think it's Hulk in a later paragraph. There are people who would think it's Iron Man in a later paragraph, and that's fine. But that doesn't need to go in the outset of the paper. And then finally, the last thing the thesis statement shouldn't do is be self-referential. It shouldn't be a this guy statement. It shouldn't say something like, in this paper, I am going to, because that's going to pull readers out of the argument. You're getting them to focus on the genre of the paper and you as an author, and it doesn't need to do that. There's no benefit to that. All a thesis statement needs to do is clearly communicate who the audience is, if that's not built into the genre, what the topic is going to be, and what your conclusions about that topic are for that particular audience. And that is what makes a thesis statement.